Hi, I'm here today with Jackie, who is a practicum student, also known as an intern if you're in America. She's studying right now at the University of Victoria, and she is doing a bachelor's degree in the School of Child and Youth Care with a specialization in the early years. So Jackie came to spend 300 hours of unpaid work inside RE Learning, and she's going to give us a quick interview of what her time here was like. So Jackie, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what it is that you help people with?
Well, as you said, my name is Jackie. I'm autistic and I live in a pretty rural area. So having an online practicum has been extremely helpful in multiple ways. Um, I, because I'm autistic, I wanted to support children who felt like their communication style was different than, say, the norm. And having that support can be extremely helpful to know that you're not alone in your communication style.
For sure, yeah. And where would you say, like before we started working together, what was your mindset around neurodivergent communication?
I think that I learned a lot about myself and my communication styles that it's often buried over years and years of internalization of what communication looks like and how it's perceived. And that's definitely widened through my 300 hours with you.
Well, can you talk a little bit about like specific struggles that you had with communication in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. I think commonly making friends was a challenge. I would often take things quite literally. Um, there was also the challenge of having multiple relationships. So if you had multiple friends and you would internalize different behaviors, so you would mask around different people and then you would act a little differently around each one. And it was quite exhausting. So you would often be left with one or two friends. And if that particular person decided that having this one friend was just not quite enough and they wanted to have different friendships, it was quite challenging when, yeah, it was quite challenging when they would leave and you'd be like, what? And then there was just a lot of misunderstanding um, that came from the different communication styles.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds like maybe like hyper focus on a person sometimes in the process
Hmm.
of like sorting through friendships.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very common with autistic people.
So, what made you decide to do your practicum with me?
I think I was very intrigued by the possibility of working online because I often get overstimulated when working in person. And so the ability to not only work online, but also to explore this new area was just very intriguing.
The new area being what?
Neurodivergent, I guess, neurodivergent explicit exception. Sorry, like it being accepted.
Mhm.
Um, and just having that be a core value instead of, I don't know, some offhanded part of a business. It's of course.
Is there anything that almost prevented you from doing the practicum with me and art learning?
I think my self-confidence wasn't quite my self-confidence wasn't very high, so I was a little nervous about teaching online. But of course, once I started, I realized that it's not scary at all. It's just it's lovely.
What about it had you like scared or worried initially?
I think I was worried about how to handle an online class versus supporting an in-person class when a lot of the tricks that a lot of teachers use in person can't be used online. But just as you learned those tricks, it's easy to learn the new online tricks. So
Can you
like,
give an example of?
yeah, absolutely. So say, if you have multiple children in an online class, you can walk up to them to say, hey, can you tell me how you're feeling? And that physical distance sends a cue for a lot of children, not all children, of course. Or being like, okay, I'm going to take you to this side of the room and we can chat privately, versus having to go, just having everybody on the screen, which of course there's a trick for that as well.
It sounds kind of like the unknown of like how to navigate um, conversations and social situations in a
Hmm.
virtual context. Is that,
Yeah. Yeah,
am I getting that
exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So despite, you had that fear that I don't really know how to do this online. I've never done this online before. What made you go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to take this practicum placement?
I think my my want to understand, my curiosity far outweighed my fear.
Okay, so what have been your biggest takeaways so far?
Oh, there's so many. I guess of course my self-confidence has grown. Um, my skills have grown in both communication and in teaching. Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is there are so many children that are online, and having their online space is such a fantastic place for people like me. And they're not overstimulated, but oftentimes when you're on your computer, they are like homeschooled. So sometimes they won't be in the public school, which is where I worked before. And getting to meet so many new kids, it's just been fantastic. Hearing their stories and hearing their achievements, and I don't know, very fulfilling.
It sounds like you're surprised by the level of connection.
I am, but I shouldn't be. I knew I was going to connect with the kids, but I guess my capacity for connecting grew because I was not overstimulated myself because we were online.
Cool. That makes sense. What have been the biggest shifts that you've made in your practice?
The biggest shifts I've made, I think, the level of masking I did from the beginning has completely changed. Um, I have greatly reduced it because masking sends a signal that the child has to mask as well, and that's not what I wanted to have in my classroom. And so I had to do the, sorry. Um, so I had to stop masking as best I could. And I'm definitely still working on it, but I've made some big strides, I think, in my shift.
So can you describe those big strides that you have made in terms of like tangible results? Like how do you see it? How does it show up? What are you noticing?
I think what I'm noticing is a stronger connection and a self-awareness and self-love that children show as well. So for an example, I would complete the speech pattern of a child, and having that connection and that communication, and not the way, say, I as an autistic person communicate or as a neurotypical person communicates, but as that specific autistic child or that specific child communicates. I I found that he felt understood, and it was meeting people halfway that builds those connections.
And what kind of mindset shifts or internal shifts have you made since we started working together?
I definitely think my self-confidence has grown. My self-love and my self-compassion have grown, and that is definitely reflected in my teaching. Yeah, my idea of progress has changed a lot, and the whole vision of what to do, um, and how to teach, and what's acceptable and what's not, and why some things aren't acceptable and some are, and how sometimes the acceptable things in our social society is actually quite harmful for a lot of us. And all we have to do is change how we teach to make it more, not just more accessible, just built to be accessible, not just to make accommodations.
Hmm. Yeah, huge difference there between true inclusion and a willingness to accommodate. Okay, so how has your practicum, what's the experience been in general?
Oh, my experience has been fantastic. I started off with a few classes, um, and as my confidence grew, so did my classes. I have many, many classes a week now, and what's fantastic is you can have as many classes as you want. You can put them all up there, and if there's too many, you can take them down and reorder and figure out when you want to have classes and when you need time for other things. So for me, I got to experience building a business, or helping to build a business, and being on the marketing, um, and building a class of my own. And it's been an amazing experience that's just had so many branches to the one tree. It's fantastic. Really, really got to grow many skills instead of just teaching.
You did, yeah. So scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like, this was terrible. I don't want to talk to you ever again after this practicum. And 10 being like, I'm so glad I did this. This is exactly the kind of learning that I hope to get from my higher education. Where are you realistically on that spectrum?
Realistically, I'm definitely a 10 because it's changed my outlook, not just for teaching and for work, but for my life and my life structure. I feel like I can now choose not to be overstimulated for the rest of my life, which I'm so glad I got to do this at 24 and not learn it through some more harsher ways as many adults do. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a 10 or an 11.
Cool. I'm glad it applies outside of the academic context as well.
Oh, absolutely, it does.
So if someone was considering working with me, what would you tell them?
I think they definitely should. It can grow every part of your life, for me at least. It can grow your experiences, it can grow your mindset, it can grow your skills, it can grow your wallet. It can be as much or as little as you want it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So just for like context in terms of like tangible results,
Right.
um, if if you had been in a paid position,
Hmm.
I think your first month with us was a lot of like foundational work and just kind of learning the policy and procedures and whatnot. And then your second month, you had a pretty good handle on what you were doing, and you actually did over 2,000 US dollars in earnings on the Outschool platform.
It was a feeling of, I felt like a professional, and this was just a practicum. So oftentimes in a practicum, you're there to learn in more of a support role rather than a career role. But this definitely felt like I was building a career, not just one that would support me, but if I had a family, I could support my family as well, because that's the second month. And there's so much more I can do for so much longer. And I think that's fantastic. Felt like I could really help a lot of children and a lot of families by extension. And it's not a feeling of helping them fit in. It's a feeling of helping them be them. And it's so tiring being someone else. And hopefully they can take what we talked about in the lessons and realize that at least most of the time they can be themselves and know who they are without feeling any negative emotion or feeling any uncomfortable emotion. Because who they are is great. And I want them to see that.
What do you think the impact of that kind of work is?
I can feel the impact of the work in me as someone who also, of course, learned from RE learning because it's a practicum. And the entire company feels like it really embodies this neuro affirming perspective. And it really does change your outlook on yourself and therefore your outlook on the world, and changes your expectations for the world as well. It makes it so I feel like in my next area, I will be able to say, hey, no, this doesn't work and this is why. And I'm feeling okay to ask you to take a look and explore this with me. How can we make this a better place for everybody, not just me? Definitely self-confidence, self-love, self-compassion, so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger shifts that I've noticed in you as you have that self-compassion. Oh, what's the word? Why do words just disappear? Um, yeah, I guess. It's like you have to like fill your tank in different areas. So there's like you need so much knowledge to be able to do something. And then you need like the practice of like applying the skill, not just like intellectualizing it. And then, the emotional regulation piece plus the self-compassion piece, because like learning a new skill is always going to be hard. It's always going to be frustrating. It's not fun to do things that we're not good at yet. So that self-compassion piece is a huge component of like what makes people successful. And I think you've been very successful in tending to that piece of your own development in this practicum, if that makes sense. Is that making any sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because it's been easier to be it's been easier to fill those cups because I can see them in the policies and the way we teach. And if I didn't know a cup was there, how am I supposed to fill it up? And so if I found all my cups, then I can practice filling them up. And then I can, yeah.
I think we get really focused, especially in like a university context. We're always thinking a lot about the knowledge piece and then, a little bit about the skills piece, but we don't fully address like I know the School of Child and Youth Care talks a lot about like self-care, which like it ties into self-compassion and it ties into the emotional regulation piece, but they don't explicitly like say those other two parts. It's very much skills and knowledge. But your skills and knowledge are fairly useless if you're in an emotional breakdown, right? Like we need to be able to look at those pieces of it as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in order to make the most of our skills and knowledge. And if we neglect feeling our feelings, and we try to solve for emotional regulation with things like more knowledge, we end up even more
Unbalanced.
imbalanced, and it doesn't actually solve for the problems that we have. It's just a distraction that keeps us in motion, and allows us to avoid the action around feeling our feelings and sitting with the uncomfortable emotions that come with like putting yourself out there online and talking to strangers and meeting new families through a Zoom call, which can be really scary.
Hmm.
Cool. I think that was lots of info for people. Any like closing remarks you want to make?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think we covered everything. Definitely check out our learning.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you.